William Clouston, leader of the SDP, a man who's eminently sensible and will no doubt agree with me that if you turn off the traffic lights, people will actually drive better. It's as simple as that. I know it's not particularly political, this, but it sort of is, William, because, you know, when we talk about stuff like personal responsibility and the fact that people don't seem to have any anymore, I think it's time we gave some of it back to them, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, and actually your caller was quite right. There have been instances, cases where you've taken away all traffic regulations, you know, completely, all road markings, and actually allow people just to make their own negotiations there and then, and people are a lot more cautious. I think the bigger problem in this country now is just petty not abiding by the rules. In Corbridge, actually, right. People just parking where they like, and it's increasing, and the more people do it, the more people think they can do it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And the more responsible people are, the less reliant they are on government. And I think one of the worst things that we've seen as a result of COVID and the lockdowns and all of that is that people have become kind of inured to making decisions. They'd rather have the decisions made for them because they've got used to that.
Yeah. No, that's quite... anyway, we'll see how this goes, this issue. I think, as I say, more civility, more courtesy for other people would be helpful, I think.
I think so, and that also kind of expounds to some of the Prime Minister's colleagues in the Cabinet, shall we say. Angela Rayner, for example, not exactly the friendliest of people, likes to push her weight around, has been doing a sort of bit of a media round lately, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that she doesn't know what she's talking about.
Yeah, no, it was shocking, actually, the interview she did on Sunday, where she literally couldn't count. She was roasted by the questioner on housing, unable to connect the massive need. It was just embarrassing, actually. Yeah.
It really was. I mean, I couldn't quite believe that they'd let her out. I mean, I wrote a piece to the Telegraph just yesterday saying that, you know, I blame Keir Starmer not only for sort of, you know, deserting his post and leaving the country to go and off on some jolly to try and fulfil some ridiculous notion of, you know, of green subsidies and green partnerships in Newcastle and Manchester, but he's left Angela Rayner in charge of the clattering train, and she clearly is not capable of running it.
No, as I say, I mean, she's an experienced politician, but she managed to say that there were plenty of houses and that we have a housing crisis. Well, both can't be true. It was literally embarrassing. I copied it, I shared it on Twitter, and I got nearly 750,000 impressions on that because it was so bad. You know, it's really bad. I mean, anyway, so I don't know what we do with this government. I knew they'd be bad. I think the only certain thing in British politics is that Labour will fail and fail badly, and therefore the country will suffer.
Well, let's have a look at that clip you were talking about, because I think unless you've seen it, it's hard to explain how bad it is.
Where the 2.5 million immigrants that are in Rachel Reeves' budget figures going to turn up? Where they're going to live?
Well, there's plenty of housing in the UK, but the houses, especially social
hang on. You can't, on the one hand, say we've got to build this 1.5 million houses and then say there's plenty of housing already.
There is plenty of housing, Trevor, already, but there's not enough for the people that desperately need it. So the homes, especially under our affordable homes programme, which is social and affordable housing, they will be there for people who desperately need them, local people. We've already outlined how we're going to support veterans and people who are fleeing domestic violence. Okay. Councils need...
Yes, I mean, the problem is that she seems very confused about even the brief that she's supposed to be in charge of. You know, either we've got more houses than we need, or we haven't. I mean, it seems to me that we have actually been building houses, but for whatever reason, the people that need the houses aren't getting into them.
Yeah, but the point is, it's the immigration. I mean, what they won't talk about is if you know, immigration's up to nearly 1 million net. Yeah. Where are people going to live? I've made this point so many times. You know, they seem determined to keep this off the agenda. They will not talk about it. Do they think new arrivals will literally live in thin air? What do they think will happen? Right. It's got to have an effect. So if you look at the whole Parliament, Labour plans 1.5 million houses. They won't build those. They've got no chance. They're already behind in that. They don't know how they're going to do it. The public sector capacity isn't there to do it anyway. The private sector is constrained. So they won't do it. Meanwhile, you're importing millions of other immigrants in. And, you know, so if you're a British person trying to rent or buy a house, you're scuppered.
Yeah. I know. It is absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? And meanwhile, she's talking about clearing green belts, making, you know, areas the size of Surrey available for building housing and prisons. But it's all a bit kind of pie in the sky, because we keep hearing things like, we'll have it all ready by 2031, or, you know, in about 5 years' time you might be able to move into a house, and you might even be able to have an operation on the NHS because we'll have fixed that by then. You know, it's all a bit far away, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not... I mean, the government is right that not all green belt is prime ecological or prime agricultural land. So there are green belt areas that are not particularly brilliant. And the green belt was instituted to stop towns and cities running into each other. People think they're ecological or agricultural. They're not, actually. It wasn't originally about that. I'm alarmed, though, about the government's general attitude on this. So the new prisons they're proposing, the Ministry of Justice, they want to fast-track that through... or elected officials, just give themselves consent. So the proposal is for those new schemes to go, those super prisons, to go straight to the planning inspectorate and bang it through within 8 weeks. Well, if you're a local councillor or you're a local resident, you'll have no say in that at all. Likewise, on planning, on housing, there are proposals, it's mooted, that the Labour government are going to introduce proposals to basically allow planning officers, not elected people, not elected councillors, but planning officers, delegated rights to approve schemes straight through without the local councillors or the local people having a say. This is very, very undemocratic. Yeah. So we'll see. I'm going to watch that very carefully, Mike.
Well, I mean, anyone who advocates less democracy, I think you should be always very suspicious of, and that would appear to be what Labour's current policy is.
It is. No, on this, I think it's reeks of desperation, basically. They realise they're already behind on their housing targets and the other things, so they just think, oh, we'll just ram it through without anyone having a say. And I have to say, Mike, I mean, there was a recent very large prison approved in Chorley, in Lancashire, near Chorley, and again, massive opposition locally. The Labour Party just rammed it through, basically.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, that's no way to run a government, and it's no way to run a country. And it's certainly no way to run what you might call long-term strategy. I mean, they keep saying that they've got a plan. They keep rebooting the plan. I mean, since they rebooted the last plan last Thursday, Keir Starmer's approval rating's gone even further down the toilet.
Yeah, no, they're actually very alarmed. I mean, you've got Reform, who are in some polls second now. So I think panic is running through both the major parties, and I think obviously the public have done the Tory party, and I think it's toxic brand, actually. It's very difficult for them. And I think Labour are next. I think the next election there'll be a revolution. I've predicted this. I'm sure it's going to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been saying ever since they got in that I don't think they'll last the course. I think that they will need to have some kind of massive, you know, readjustment. And that readjustment might be that they have to either get rid of Keir Starmer and the current sort of front bench team and find some other way to do it. Because, you know, people keep saying to me, oh, we can't just kick out the government. They've got a massive majority. But he's not working. He's not long for this course, I don't think.
I think you might be right about Starmer. I don't think you're right about the Labour Party. I think the Labour Party has a majority that's sufficient to get right the way through for the 4.5 years or whatever it is. Yeah. They will probably almost certainly do that. And I think there's a sort of a brutal parliamentary fact about that. I think that what you could have, what's more likely, is that they copy the Tories, but have a succession of leaders that are inept and useless. And you know, you look at the people that ended up being Prime Minister, Liz Truss and so on, it was just chaos. So I think that's probably more likely. But I think the Labour Party will... They just basically, Mike, they have the numbers to get through, and they will get through. But mark my words, there'll be a revolution at the end of this decade. Yeah, but the problem is, though, William, that they might get through it, but I don't think they will for several reasons. One is that they keep making mistakes to such an extent that the mistakes are leaving more and more people not only disenchanted with what they're doing, but also kind of disgusted by what they're doing and really, really resentful of what they're doing. So when you talk about a revolution or a civil war or something like that, I mean, I'm not going to, you know, enjoy talking about that kind of level of violence, but what I am going to say is that people will demand another election or something. Something will have to happen, because I just don't see that they can steward this economy in any way, shape or form which is going to do anything other than ruin it. Right, and I think in the end, the establishment, you know, the Bank of England or you know the money markets or something will do what they did to Liz Truss, and they will force an election because they're making so many mistakes. And the thing about the Tories was that they didn't really do as much damage as Labour are now doing, because they didn't do an awful lot. They kind of said they would do stuff, but didn't really do it. Labour are doing things which are actively damaging the economy. Yeah, what I mean by a revolution is a political revolution. I don't think you're going to get civil unrest, which forces a government change in this country. I don't think it'll work like that. I don't think it should. What you get is total disenchantment by the public for these two rotten parties that have mismanaged our country. Yeah. And I think you'll have to have alternatives. On the right, the alternative is reform. On the Conservative left, it's the SDP. But I think I just see at the end of the decade, people will be very disinclined to vote Labour. And I think the Tories are already a toxic brand because of what they've done on break to mass immigration. I think it's just, the public is sick of these parties. And I think they'll force change in the ballot box in the right way.
Mm. Yeah, I think they will. I think they'll force change in the area of reform because that seems to be the only real alternative for people who have had enough.